CTE stands for chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is a progressive degenerative disease in the brain, found in people with a history of repetitive brain trauma. This can occur in any person of any age, whether you play sports, contact sports, or even just have hit your head a few times. The brain is one of the most precious organs in the human body, yet is injured a lot more than most people realize. My cousin played football in high school, and he had so many head traumas that his doctors actually told him to stop playing sports altogether, just in case of the future trauma that will happen to his head. But I played football from 5th till 9th grade, and I had 2 concussions, and I got knocked out a couple times. And just realizing how traumatic those hits on a young kid's head. I was 12 years old playing football, contact football, and those hits on my young developing brain could have taken a toll. But anyway, CTE has no cure, but there are still some things you can do to avoid getting it when you're older. In this speech, I'll be talking about the cause of CTE, the effect of CTE, and possible solution on how to cut back on young kids from getting CTE while their brain is still developing. CTE can virtually happen to anyone, especially athletes and military veterans. CTE is caused from heavy hitting blows to the head or explosions. CTE is caused from many blows to the head when it is shaken around within the skull. It used to actually be called punch drunk because it was first diagnosed in retired boxers because their cognitive abilities declined when they aged. CTE is found in many retired boxers because of the blows to the head and that they would take during their fights, along with football players, of course, getting hit around for the whole game. Outside of sports, CTE can be found in military veterans from blast injuries and combat, along with victims of domestic abuse from repetitive violence. CTE can be found in many different instances, but finding them during contact sports is so much more relevant and dangerous. When there are these repeated blows to the brain, an abnormal protein called tau builds up, and it affects the brain and causes degeneration of the cognitive functions, which makes the brain tissue turn to a dark brown color. CTE can happen to people even if they haven't played sports in 30 years, or even if they just had a couple concussions when they were younger. There's so many causes to for CTE to develop. The effects CTE has on the brain is very dangerous and detrimental to the brain. CTE can spread to many different areas of the brain, which can affect the brain negatively. When affecting different parts of the brain, it can affect the person's personality and decision making. The National Football League player Aaron Hernandez was in trial for a crime and ended up going to prison for it. He ended up killing himself in prison after only a few weeks behind bars. When he had passed, Boston University researcher who looks at brains of college athletes and professional athletes, her autopsy of Hernandez's brain revealed evidence of severe CTE, along with early signs of brain shrinkage, even though Hernandez was only 27 years old. People question that Hernandez was too young because CTE is so common in retirees, but Dr. Ann McKee claimed that she has seen CTE in people as young as 18 years old. CTE affects different areas of the brain in many different ways. It can affect irregular behavior and emotions, aggression, depression, memory loss, and dementia. Those are just some of the serious symptoms that have come from CTE in retirees and military veterans. When these football players gave their brains up for research, doctors found more and more causes of CTE and saw the protein called tau, which is a very similar path in patients with Alzheimer's disease. There are some solutions to cut back on the number of CTE happening, but people aren't big fans of what may come. Because CTE is so common in athletes, solutions are a little more difficult. The National Football League has been conducting research about how to make helmets more effective in stopping concussions from happening. They have implemented many rules to try and protect the athletes from getting such devastating blows to the head. The rules have changed a lot in the last few years, but there are still a lot of bad blows in the league. People want to completely take the sport of football away because of the negative effects it has on people's bodies and especially their brains. People have also talked about removing all sports that are hard-hitting like hockey, boxing, or football, where more CTE cases are coming in. Since CTE is common in football more than anything, they have come up with ideas to limit head traumas. They've talked about taking out hitting completely and making it a professional flag football league, but fans aren't really behind that idea because a lot of fans like to watch football because of the hard hits. CTE still has no cure, and not everyone knows how serious it is, but there are ways to avoid it. There are several causes for CTE and are especially found in retired athletes who donated their brains to research. CTE has lots of effects on the brain and can really mess up people's heads. Several people end up committing suicide because of the toll it takes on them mentally. There aren't a whole lot of solutions for athletes to avoid CTE, especially in those hard-hitting sports. But CTE can happen to anyone who has had multiple head traumas in their lifetime, like concussions. If you have ever had any serious concussions in your life, getting checked for CTE when you're older or even soon is a good idea to be cautious of any symptoms.